Hello and welcome to another episode, video of Punk 5 Pop. I'm Punk 5. Today I wanted to do something a little different and talk to you about Star Wars Squadrons, the latest Star Wars title from EA. Now, for this little deal, we're gonna break it up into different sections, and I'm gonna include timestamps for when each section starts. That way, if you only want to hear about gameplay mechanics, graphic fidelity, or story, you can jump right to that point in the video. Now, with the intro out of the way, let's talk about this clunky good time of a space flight sim. So I wanted to start with the gameplay mechanics of Squadrons. So if you jump onto Steam and look at the reviews for the game, one thing you will see brought up constantly is how clunky these controls are. Now, I'm not denying the controls could be tightened up or otherwise improved, but you also need to temper your expectations of this game. Unlike Microsoft's Flight Simulator series that attempts to recreate real-life flight controls as closely as possible, Squadrons is closer to Ace Combat. You don't play the Ace Combat games for a realistic experience of flying fighter jets. You play them to have the fun of zipping around, firing missiles and machine guns at enemy aces using traditional video game controls. With D-pad, thumbsticks. For all you PlayStation lovers out there, triangle, square, circle, and X buttons, that type of thing. The idea of Star Wars Squadrons is to let players have fun blowing away enemy Rebel and Imperial ships using the series' most famous starships, X-Wings, TIE Fighters, Y-Wings, TIE Bombers, TIE Interceptors, U-Wings, a whole razzmatazz, which is a phrase I have never used before, and I don't think I'm ever going to use it again, since it makes me sound like an even bigger old man than I already am. Alright, the controls. Basically, they were never going to be super realistic, but they also should have been a lot tighter. What's interesting is that your experience will vary depending on the ship you're flying and its loadout. Some fighters, like the X-Wing, feel big and unwieldy compared to the zippier little A-Wings that can stop and turn on a dime. Now, every fighter you fly in the game will have their own unique advantages and disadvantages that's going to affect your preferences. It actually creates an interesting experience where you begin leaning toward a specific ship with a certain loadout you keep coming back to again and again. You're also going to notice the differences between Imperial and Rebel ship designs, because the devs of Squadrons actually managed to give both sides a distinctive feel, whether it's the increased speed and maneuverability of TIE fighters that can't depend on shields, or the harder hitting and shielded Rebel fighters. Which is something I absolutely loved about the game. Is in the lore of Star Wars, you always hear how Imperial pilots will call Rebel fighter pilots weak and too dependent on their shields. That flying TIE fighters, you can't depend on that fallback of shields coming in to save your ass. So it was actually really fun to have the sensation come in from the lore. And I'm having a hard time putting it into words, just exactly the difference in feel. Because you actually do become dependent a little bit on your shields when you're fighting on the rebel side of things. Then you jump back over to the Imperial fighters, and you're like, oh, I better actually get my butt in gear and start dodging a little better. Now, when you first jump into these cockpits, you will not be an ace pilot right out of the gate. There is a real learning curve to the controls. Everything from balancing your speed and turns to managing ship systems takes time to master. Ship systems balance is actually one of the most interesting parts of Squadron's gameplay. Now, every fighter on the Rebel side has engines, weapons, and shield controls. You have the ability to have your ship's computer focus on which system that you need the most at the time. You need to reach that objective quickly, push full power to the engines to increase your speed. In a major dogfight where your weapons are key, full power to the laser banks. Your droid's screaming that your ass is on fire. Best put the shields at full strength. Now, like I mentioned, Imperial ships have the same setup minus the shielding system. Though what many Imperial ships have as a replacement to that is a quick repair system that you can also have on Rebel fighters, but on the Imperial ships it generates a lot faster, allowing you to heal up your whatever fighter you're in much faster and more often. Still, all of these systems, no matter which side you're on, allow you to adapt to situations on the fly, switching power to different systems with only the press of a button. And besides these basic ship systems, you're also allowed to tailor your fighter's loadout to fit your playstyle and the demands of the mission. You can decide between an array of laser cannons, missile types, missile deterrents, hull types, shielding systems, engine systems. And for a $40 game without microtransactions, from EA no less, this is a pretty solid amount of customization. And in addition to all of that, once you're out in the field, you can press C if you're on PC, which is what I played this on. I'm not sure what it'll be for Xbox and PlayStation, but it'll still have this where you can have your ship pull even more power to one major system from the other. For example, if you want to get to your objective faster, you can dump power into the engines by telling the ship systems to pull energy from weapons to give you an extra boost of speed. This complements the system's management I've already talked about, giving the player even more ways to adapt to the mission. At the same time, though, you need to keep track of where you put your focus to be ready to change it depending on what's happening. Once you hit the objective area and those rebel scum are bearing down on you, laser bank charge is going to make a lot more difference than your engines. And while you have power drawn all to the engines, your laser banks are not going to regenerate very quickly. I mean, almost not at all, because they're constantly draining into the engines. And vice versa. So, all of this gives Squadrons a tactical feel that helps make you feel like a true starfighter pilot in a pitched battle for the galaxy. So when it comes to the missions themselves, they can feel a little monotonous. As in, you're going to feel like you're doing the same thing over and over. With you being regularly tasked to shoot down enemy starfighters or frigates. Thankfully, though, the devs were smart enough to mix things up with optional objectives. Now, most of these missions, you get an optional objective that can give you an extra level of challenge. The optional objectives can even help you complete the main mission faster and easier. A great example of that is when you're told to take down a rebel capital ship. If you can't tell, I really love fighting for the Empire. It was just fun. Oh, I love TIE fighters. Gets me going in the morning. So you're tasked with taking down this rebel capital ship, which is equipped with heavy shielding, targeting systems, and a tractor beam, which, if it pulls you in, you will be captured, mission over, so on and so forth. Thing is, you can hit the rebels' targeting shield generators or their targeting system on their Nebulon B so that you can cripple the ship before landing that killing blow. Of course, you can also just attack the bulk of the ship straight away, ignore these optional objectives where you can damage it and kind of break it down before you finish it off. But that is going to make it a lot harder on you. I mean, with no shields or targeting systems, a Nebulon B is nowhere near the threat to you it was before. So these optional objectives spice up missions that are otherwise going to be more of the same. But then the game will throw missions at you that completely throw you out of this routine you've gotten into. There are a few that stand out to me where you'll be doing things like setting up a minefield using the power cores of ruined Star Destroyers to destroy a rebel fleet with, luring them into this big trap inside of a debris field where suddenly you're just going to start boom, 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 setting up your own personal fireworks show. Or there are other times you will be doing a trench run that are a great callback to A New Hope without blatantly ripping off the Death Star attack, where you'll be doing things like going inside of an enemy capital ship to take out major systems, or doing a trench run around an enemy base to take out their coolant systems. I mean, overall, it offers a real challenge that'll force players to use all of the skills they've been building through the first half of the game. So all in all, Star Wars Squadrons offers a great gameplay experience that easily competes with fully priced games, despite the clunky controls. Now we've got gameplay out of the way. I wanted to jump into talking about the graphics. So, to start off, I was running the game on my PC with a NVIDIA 1060 Ti graphics card, 16 gigs of RAM on a 75 Hz widescreen monitor. My rig had no issues running Squadrons on ultra settings, so if you have a setup that is close or better than mine in terms of parts, and you're playing on PC, you will have zero problem playing this game at its max. Now, how it's going to play on PlayStation or Xbox, I can't be sure. But I wouldn't say this is the most graphically heavy game, as pretty as it tends to look. And current gen systems shouldn't have that big of a problem with it. You can also play all of this game in VR if you have a VR headset up. I don't, so I'm not sure how it looks or plays from that. You can check out other YouTubers. I believe people like Eckhart's Ladder were able to do the game in VR, so check them out for more of a look at things from that angle. But beyond all that, if you are able to run the game on ultra settings, I highly suggest you do so because the visuals are beautiful, especially for a $40 game that makes other Star Wars EA titles look fairly bad in comparison. And starfighters are easily the standouts of Squadron's visuals, though. Every ship, the cockpits in particular, look fantastic, capturing not only the general looks from the movies, but also the tiniest details. The devs did not skimp on decking these ships out to make them look like true starships filled with buttons, dials, switches. In fact, my biggest complaint on that front is how little you are able to interact with inside of the cockpits. They're, like I said, it's chock full of things to touch, but you only are able to interact with just about 3 buttons plus the flight stick. Everything else is really just there for show. And it feels a little silly to have all of this in there but not do more to have the player interact with it. Still, the environments quickly make up for that, with great visuals that really make the world come to life. You travel to a wide range of star systems during the campaign that all have their own unique feel to them. And there are missions that have you fighting inside the debris field of a moon that's breaking apart, making you fly through massive chunks of floating surface rock all around you. And it's all different shapes and sizes, lit up by the moon's exposed molten core. In another mission, you have to carefully navigate a terrifying nebula known as the Xavian Abyss that is filled with magnetic asteroids creating lightning storms. And make no doubt about it, that lightning can and will fry your ass. On top of all the asteroids flinging around you and the enemy starfighters. So overall, I never got bored looking at these backdrops that the developers obviously did not need to spend so much time crafting. In fact, I wish they had put more of that time into improving the character models for the people you're interacting with during the campaign. Every time you talk to one of Squadron's wide range of characters, you can't help but notice how stiff they look. None of the NPCs have a big range of facial expressions or movements. Anytime you're talking to one of them, the only thing that stands out is their hand gestures. Because their hands are constantly making these awkward gestures in all different directions. And there's a fountain of potential meme templates using these characters and their hand gestures. It takes "I don't know what to do with my hands" to bold new heights. Hell, there were moments I had to replay dialogue because I didn't hear what was said. I was so distracted by their flapping hands, or them adjusting their gloves, or shifting their hands around on their hips. Even more frustrating than the crazy hands and near Brie Larson levels of lacking facial expression is when the dialogue doesn't match the character's mouth movements. Throughout the game, I would see NPCs' lips get out of sync with what they were saying. And this made how the character's tone of voice didn't match what they were saying even more jarring. Your commander could sound fairly calm despite boiling with anger about the massive loss that you and your squadron just suffered. Clearly, the majority of development time went into the ships and environments, with character models becoming almost an afterthought. If you didn't like how characters looked and acted in Mass Effect Andromeda, you're not gonna like how they look in Squadrons either. It's almost uncomfortable, really, to look at them at times. Alright, so now we've knocked out how the game plays and looks, but what can you expect from the campaign storyline? Going into it, my expectations were not super high for Squadron storyline. It's a $40 game that was marketed primarily as a space fighter sim. Also, this is Disney Star Wars and an EA game. You certainly should not have been expecting a great deal from either one. In the end, the campaign lived up to my expectations, lasting about 7 to 10 hours, with a very basic story to tell. Obviously, the amount of time it lasts is gonna vary depending on how much you put into it, whether you take the time to actually talk to all the side characters and really focus on the briefings and things like that. Still, you switch back and forth through the campaign, playing as both an Imperial and Rebel pilot caught up in the end of the Galactic Civil War. The game starts just after the destruction of Alderaan, before quickly shifting to the post-Endor period. The New Republic has been formed, and the Empire is falling apart, with all different warlords cropping up trying to grab power. So, narratively, it mainly focuses on the New Republic's secretive Starhawk project, which Star Wars Legends fans will remember. The Starhawk as a capital ship the New Republic designed counter Imperial Star Destroyers in the old expanded universe. So on one side of the story, you have a former Imperial captain, Lyndon James, who heads Vanguard Squadron. And in the Imperial corner, you have a former pupil of Lyndon's, Teresa Carroll, who, in 1998, threw mankind off Hell in a Cell. No. Okay, my editor says I can't make that joke because it's too lame. So, getting back on point, Teresa actually commands Titan Squadron and the Star Destroyer Overseer, answering to Admiral Sloan from Disney's new EU book trilogy Aftermath. If any of you have picked that up, you'll remember her. So this is actually the first time you see Admiral Sloan as an actual character model. Before, she's only been in the books, so that was at least somewhat interesting. The story itself takes you through each commander hunting the other as the Republic rushes to first finish and then defend their prototype Starhawk. So besides these two commanders, each side has multiple supporting characters that include squad mates, other leaders, and a mechanic for each side. None of them stand out in particular, just like the story. These characters are not the most amazing you're ever going to see, but they were never truly meant to be either. Again, this is more about you getting to jump into an X-Wing and blow something up. So before and after each mission, you have a chance to talk to all of them, where they discuss the mission, their hatred of either the rebels or the Empire, and you get some backstory on each of them. Sadly, they almost never have anything of interest to say. It was nearly impossible to stay focused when they were talking because of how generic the dialogue was. Also, the flapping hands that are shimming here and there and everywhere. Oh, honestly, one of the only times they caught my attention was when, I believe her name is Dio, the character that the Wars Squadrons writer stupidly keeps going after fans about having they them pronouns, which never ever came up. Just want to point that out there to anybody who's concerned about identity politics being injected into Squadrons. It wasn't there. This whole they them non-binary deal you see on Twitter and making the rounds on YouTube, that was made up by one frigging idiot who's probably going to get himself fired for attacking the fan base over a non-existent issue that has never even come up in the game. Because he's a series of words that YouTube will not allow me to say if anybody's ever going to see this video. Damn. So she would talk about these weird feelings, or shockingly lucky guesses she made. And over time, it becomes painfully clear that she is Force sensitive, even mentioning that people on her homeworld are taught to respect the Force. If you're a fan of the Clone Wars animated series, you'll probably, like me, very quickly realize that she belongs to the same race as Luminara Unduli, the Jedi Master, and her Padawan, Barriss Offee. So it all boils down showing that she's definitely Force sensitive, but she doesn't really want people to know. Probably my favorite line of dialogue in the whole game comes from her when she is telling you to try and keep all of this stuff she tells you on the down low, because people are very wary of Force users still. I mean, we're at a point in the galaxy's history where Luke's Jedi Praxium on Yavin hasn't cropped up very much, so the Jedi are still widely feared as evil. To me, it was an interesting way of handling that aspect. Other times, though, they will name drop people like Luke Skywalker, or mention the Clone Wars. Altogether, it's a way to try making you care about these people, but odds are you'll want to skip talking to them to jump back into the action. Which is honestly the main point of why this game was even made, is so you can jump in an X-Wing and blow stuff up. In another cheap shot at getting your attention, however, Squadrons dropped some member-berry characters, such as General Hera Syndulla. from the animated Star Wars Rebels. She pops up as the leader of Project Starhawk, talks to you during some briefings. Later on in the game, shows up in person to talk to you. On another mission, you actually get to fly with Wedge Antilles of Rogue Squadron, flying with him over the skies of Yavin 4. Just to, hey everyone, remember Yavin? You remember Wedge? Hell, even at the beginning of the game, Admiral Akbar makes a short appearance. Ironically, getting more respect than he got in The Last Jedi. Hell, he gets more dialogue than The Last Jedi ever thought of giving him. Lord, poor Akbar. I mean, it's fun to see these characters again, but they only add a small amount of spice to a very bland story. Yet, adding them in allows this story to do the one thing I actually appreciated as a Star Wars fan about it, which was melding the old and new expanded universes. Because the Starhawk, Wedge Antilles, Rogue Squadron, things like that are all part of the old EU that Disney decanonized and renamed Legends after buying Lucasfilm. And to anybody working at Disney, if you ever see this video, how did that work out? Can you tell me? Please tell me how well did wiping out the old canon work for you? I'm so curious. Now, Hera and many other elements included in Star Wars Squadrons are part of the new canon that Disney has been trying to build. And Squadrons is one of the few times the two have meshed together well. You visit Hosnian Prime as the New Republic's capital instead of Coruscant, even though the two look identical. But that aside, it didn't feel like they were snubbing the old canon or the new canon. It felt like the dev team did their best to, put them on an even playing field for once. And I have to applaud Squadron's dev team for making Disney's messy handling of Star Wars canon not look quite so bad. Even if the story they tell in the game is nothing special, it was at least enjoyable, and it didn't try to subvert my expectations. You have no idea how much that phrase bugs me to this day. Subverting expectations. Alright. What are you going to do next to subvert my expectations? Shave a Wookiee and put it on screen? Don't. Star Wars Squadrons is a clunky good time. The controls and other gameplay mechanics could be far tighter. The characters and overarching story doesn't dazzle, but works well enough not to be a terrible slog. The visuals, truthfully, are where the game shines the most, with the loving detail put into the ships, the environments, just the little details that they put into it. When you put it all together, though, Squadrons makes you feel like a true starfighter pilot for the Empire and the Rebellion. The multiplayer that I didn't have a lot of time to play yet should give you hours of enjoyment anytime you feel like jumping back into the cockpit. At the end of the day, no matter what level of a Star Wars fan you are, the odds are good you're going to enjoy this game. It's reasonably priced. One big shocking thing to me was the complete lack of microtransactions in the game so far. Obviously, EA could add them in later, but right now the game is not filled with microtransactions. You can earn tons of little cosmetics just by playing the game. So, while this will never win Game of the Year and it won't top the charts, I'd recommend it if you're into flight sims or Star Wars or ever just wanted to feel like a fighter jockey inside the cockpit of a super advanced starfighter. So, let me know what you think about Star Wars Squadrons yourselves. I'd love to hear what other people have to say about it. Just your general opinions. Until next time, I've been Punk5. This has been Punk5 Pop. I'll see you around.